So we've got Luke Segers. He is the CTO and co-founder of Subsalt. He'll be joining in. Might take a second just to make sure he's all set up.
There he is.
There he is. Thanks for being here, Luke.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. I'm going to bow out and let you two have it. I'm going to stop.
Great. Thanks so much for joining, Luke. Always love to hear about the awesome things you're doing over at Subsalt. Such a cool area you're in right now, right at that intersection of AI and data privacy. So just wanted to have you on and just talk to us a little bit about, what your company is, what it does, and then we'll just go in a little bit about, how Replicated kind of fits into all that. So if you could just tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how it all works, that would be awesome.
For sure. Well, thanks for having me. Like you said, I'm the CTO of Subsalt. We are a startup. We founded, my co-founders and I founded the company about 18 months ago. So we're still pretty early on. But we de-identify sensitive data for healthcare institutions, financial institutions, and other groups who have a lot of useful data that in general is hard to use because it's sensitive. And as a result, it ends up not getting used, or it takes 6 months to get access to use it, or something like that. And so our product is a cloud native piece of data infrastructure. And we've been Replicated clients for coming up on a year now, I think, and use Replicated for all of our customer deployments. We started as a managed SaaS offering, but it quickly became clear that we were going to need to be able to deploy close to the data, because in a lot of cases, it can't leave customer VPCs. And so that's when we turned to Replicated, started working with you all. And honestly, tips like the ones you were just sharing really helped us get started and get our previously cloud-hosted product, something that we could actually deploy into customer environments.
Awesome. So how big is your current team?
So we are 6 people strong.
Oh, wow. You've actually grown since I think the last time I asked you that question. That's pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, we're blowing up. Yeah, but that's 3 technical people, including myself. And so when we did our first VPC deployment, we were 2 technical people, which honestly blew my mind that even could happen. And it would have been a really big challenge without having some tool to help us along the way.
Yeah, I always think that's just when I think about your company and I think about the size of it, and they're shipping updates and you're doing all these things. It's actually really cool that you're able to as such a tiny team manage a SaaS product and an on-prem product and get those updates out to your customers.
It blew my mind. I'm actually pretty amazed as well, if I may say so.
Yeah.
But it's worked really well. And honestly, we now promote the on-prem deployment model as much, if not more, than our managed version. It just makes sense, especially in healthcare, to be able to deploy something close to the data, which is often pretty locked up. And so, it's actually, I would call it our primary deployment method now.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about how you deploy Replicated and what a customer kind of engagement looks like, how you get it out there, and then kind of how the data flows around.
Yeah, so to give a bit more on what the product does, I guess I should say that. So we de-identify data sets. Medical records is a good kind of conceptual model for what a relevant data set would be. What our product actually does is runs a bunch of generative models on the underlying data sets. We can learn patterns in, for example, like a COVID testing data set, and then get rid of the real data and produce what's called synthetic data that is extremely high fidelity, guaranteed to be de-identified under HIPAA in the case of healthcare. And so teams can use it much more permissively. You don't have to be quite as strict about who can get access to it. It doesn't have to be just the short list of data scientists. It can actually be a bigger group within the company or perhaps outside the company. And we do all that with generative AI methods. And so we're deploying, we have a Helm-based deployment that we typically ship into customer environments for a proof of value. So this would be early contract or even pre-contract in some cases. We're letting them install it, feel it out, run some updates, run some data through. And that's done with replicated. And then we can pretty easily flip their license when they convert to a non-trial license, like a full-time license, at which point they can run updates and kind of manage the tool on their own. And so we actually use a lot of the best practices, probably because we learned them from you all, but we use a lot of the best practices you were just running through in terms of like how we ship updates would be, we have our CI/CD system. Whenever we push a new version of the product, it pushes those images out to Replicated's container registry. And then we notify customers and they can just kind of go in with COTS and click update, and it usually works pretty well. So we actually have gotten, the first time we used it, we actually got explicit compliments on how straightforward it was from their DevOps team, which it was great to hear. I wasn't expecting it, but they were outwardly complimentary about how straightforward it was.
Yeah, that's great. And I think so. So you mentioned, that license stuff a little bit. Could you talk a little bit about how you use license management and what you like? Because I think you've done some interesting things there as far as like managing how your customers use features and the license management functionality.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know if they're. I don't know if these would fall into best practice category, but for us, the license. A lot of the stuff you all have built into licenses made it very easy to convert from SaaS, and not so a SaaS-based technical product, but also a team that's just more familiar with building SaaS products, into something that has like deployment specific variables and like some credentials stuff. Like, how do we package all that kind of stuff up for 10 different customers who need to have 10 different sets of API keys, for example? And we use like license fields for that. So it's very easy for like someone setting up an account within Subsalt. They get a series of text boxes that they fill out, drop in the relevant credentials, and then can press publish, more or less. And so we're never exchanging explicitly like sensitive keys with like the customer's team at all. They just kind of receive them and don't even have to worry about it. They just like get the license file and drag and drop it, and then it's in, and we can kind of manage everything else from our side. So getting it allowed us to like cut some corners on simplifying stuff. We don't have to worry as much about like, okay, there's 6 different API keys. Like, how do we coordinate all this stuff? They can just grab a JSON file and like move it to the right place, and then it just kind of works. So
that's great. So we have a couple minutes left, but I did have one question that I keep thinking about Subsalt when I see it. All this stuff with like ChatGPT and these large language models. What do you think about that and how that interacts with on-prem? Like, what do you like? I just want some general thoughts, because I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I remember taking like AI classes back in college, and like I remember the list of things I was like, these won't be possible with AI in our lifetimes or whatever. That list is shattered at this point. Like, it actually is pretty amazing how quickly LLMs in particular have advanced. And like on-prem LLMs, we were just talking earlier this week within the team about how that's like exists now. Like, you can go online and just get one, which means that we could like consider integrating LLMs into our on-prem products. Like that wasn't something that I saw coming at all. It's pretty amazing. I actually was just talking to someone else on the team this morning about like a lot of the use cases that come out are conversational use cases. I think there's a ton of interesting stuff around like data management, semantic understanding of data. Like, how do you actually understand which of these fields are sensitive according to HIPAA? That's a really hard like set of code, like piece of software to write by hand, because it's not like if the column name is social security number, then mark as sensitive. Like, it's a very complicated kind of gray area sort of problem. I actually think there's a lot of interesting non-conversational use cases for that kind of stuff, which is just taking gray areas and pulling structure out of them. That's what I personally am most excited about, as well as some of the developer experience stuff, helping to better make more maintainable code, automated code reviews, that kind of stuff. I think is going to be pretty interesting as well internally. But in terms of advancing the product and bringing things like LLMs into customer environments, being able to do some of the behind the scenes non-conversational stuff for us as a data infrastructure product I think is like, we haven't even started scratching the surface.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about LLMs as a data anonymizer before, but that's actually a pretty exciting use case. It feels like our industry has just hit, a real pivotal kind of moment here with AI and data, and it's really interesting how it's going to impact everything.
Totally agree. And yeah, it's a lot of it's just making operations that were very hard to do. In a way, I think is how I think of what we do, and how I think of what you all do is like making things that were previously really hard to do a lot less hard. And for us, it's a data access thing. Questions have been pervasive in the data industry for a while around how to do things like metadata extraction. How do you find which fields are sensitive? How do you find which combinations of fields might be sensitive? This is sensitive only if there's a birth date column somewhere else too. Like there's a bunch of kind of fuzzy stuff that's really hard to codify. And so I think we might be getting to a point where some of that can just be kind of like magically done behind the scenes without throwing like 25K at a bunch of GPUs and like waiting 2 months.
So,
right?
so we did have one question I wanted to answer from the audience, which was how are you handling the need for GPU processing, if at all?
So we definitely do need GPU processing, and that's so we did most of our GPU related like configuration work in Helm, and it kind of just like has worked relatively seamlessly. So we typically have customers set up to, this might be going into too much detail, but we typically have customers set up 2 node pools. We have some processes that use GPUs, like our data pipelines that actually do the machine learning, use GPUs, the GPU node pool. And then we have other processes that like run application servers and stuff that are just CPU based. And then within Helm, we can put different resource requirements and stuff. From a replicated perspective, we'll do some like pre-flight checks, make sure the node pools exist, make sure we have access to GPUs. If we don't, we can kind of like mention that needs to happen or the pipelines aren't going to run, and just make it so that users don't have to figure out by digging through Kubernetes logs or something what's going wrong. They can kind of know that before they get too far down the path. So far, we've deployed on 2 of the 3 major clouds to date with our replicated installer, and it's worked pretty seamlessly, to be honest. Well, seamlessly once you get through the Helm stuff, but seamlessly from like a COTS installer perspective.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome, Luke. Thanks so much for joining us today. I could always spend more time talking with you, but I'm sure we'll talk before too long about some of the other things we're working on together. So thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all you all do.
Thanks, Luke.